Welcome back to Dirt Obsession, everyone. Today's video is one we've been wanting to do for a long time, as we finally get to do a head-to-head comparison between two of our favorite ATVs on the market, Yamaha's Grizzly 700 and Suzuki's KingQuad 750. We'll try to cover everything we can think of about the differences and similarities between the machines, and offer our opinions on which one excels in each category. But first, I wanted to thank all of our viewers who provided their insights in the comments of our individual tests on these machines. One of the greatest benefits for viewers of this channel, who are relatively new to the ATV market, is the knowledge that can be found by some of the regulars in our comments section. So be sure to check those comments out from the guys with experience on both ATVs, and don't be shy about asking any questions you may have. Yamaha's Grizzly 700 and Suzuki's KingQuad 750 are flagship ATVs from two of the most reputable manufacturers in the ATV business. They both built solid reputations among ATV enthusiasts with a history of reliability and balanced performance. Both machines received their last meaningful updates in 2019 when Yamaha switched back to their 686cc motor in the Grizzly and added the SE model to the lineup, and Suzuki released the latest iteration of the KingQuad with design changes that beefed up the chassis, improved power steering and suspension, and optimized performance. The Grizzly 700 XTR is the top-of-the-line 4x4 offering from Yamaha, and our Suzuki KingQuad 750 is the EPS version, which provides what we consider good value with no performance differences from the upgraded SE Plus. The KingQuad SE Plus includes a premium color option and cast aluminum wheels over the EPS version, which is similar to the base model Grizzly EPS. Ideally, we'd be putting the KingQuad SE Plus up against the EPS Grizzly, as that's the most similarly spec'd offering. But at our time of purchase, the only Grizzly available was the XTR. We'll account for the difference in tires during our comparison. Today we'll start our comparison through a buyer's lens, first by looking at the overall aesthetics, fit and finish, and a few key points both on and off the spec sheet. We're looking at some of the things discerning buyers might find if they were fortunate enough to find both machines on their dealer's floor. Looks are subjective, of course, but it's hard to deny that the Grizzly is a little sharper looking, with more aggressive lines in the bodywork, and a greater variance of color options year to year. At first glance, most eyes are going to be drawn to the aggressive front end and beefy tires of the XTR edition of the Grizzly, ours included. The key feature is the snarled front bumper that gives the Grizzly an aggressive look and adds an element of protection that the KingQuad just doesn't have unless you go to the aftermarket. We wanted that protection, so we added Suzuki's OEM front bumper to our KingQuad. The 27-inch Maxxis Zilla tires beef up the overall presence as well as the dimensions of the Grizzly, and Yamaha's factory wheels look incredible. We really can't find anything in the aftermarket that we think looks better than Yamaha's wheels. The KingQuad's side profile is a little more appealing than its blasé front end, but the tires are going to leave a little bit to be desired by the more hardcore enthusiasts. Most likely in an effort to keep the price in check, which Suzuki has managed to do when compared to the competition, they kept the tire choice south of moderate with 25-inch Carlisles. We were actually pretty impressed with the Carlisles in our initial test, and I'd personally rather save on the cost of a machine and choose my own aftermarket tires. But as we mentioned, you can expect the difference in tire selection to have performance impacts throughout this comparison. Overall, we think most will agree that from 20 feet away, the Grizzly looks a little better than the KingQuad, and the added protection of the front bumper would certainly give the nod to the Grizzly in this category. Ergonomics are similar on both machines, with the single-cylinder engines allowing for more narrow and comfortable midsections on both. Both seats are comfortable, with the Grizzly's a little softer but smaller overall, and the KingQuad's a little firmer, but longer and featuring a wider T-shape at the rear. Saying,
hey, Grizzly seat, horrible system. There's no latch whatsoever. It doesn't pop off, but yeah. Suzuki, like every four-wheeler in the world.
Nice little latch system there.
Latch system.
Goes on just a lot easier. Overall fit and finish is good on both machines, although we did find a few things that we don't like about the Grizzly during our initial test. The gap in the plastics at the headlight pod and the looseness of the headlights, those were our biggest complaints. The KingQuad is very refined, and it's hard to find any shortcomings in the fit and finish. There's even mud flaps that prevent mud, water, and debris from coming up through the more open footwells. The footwell shape is significantly different on these machines. The KingQuad has raised foot pegs for better grip and larger cutouts in the footwell for better clearing of mud and debris.
Oh, these footwells, they're great. It's like getting on a sport quad again.
Yeah, we ride a lot of adventure bikes, and obviously we ride a lot of sport quads. So these raised foot pegs on the Suzuki, they just feel a little bit more familiar to us is all. Now, we did have some comments, guys saying it felt like they were standing on the rung of a ladder, and it wasn't that comfortable for them. So I think that's going to be a personal preference deal.
Coming from sport quads though, that feels natural.
It feels much more natural. The footwells are also 2 inches longer than the Grizzlies, which gives the rider noticeably more room to manipulate their body weight around and take advantage of the longer seat. We added Yamaha's aftermarket foot pegs for better grip on the Grizzly. We wouldn't feel the need to improve the grip on the KingQuad. As we mentioned in the KingQuad test, we don't like the sweep and slope of the handlebars on the Suzuki, but the KingQuad having more room in the bodywork for the rider to move around, the longer seat, the footwells that we love, and the solid fit and finish, it's hard not to give the nod to Suzuki in this category. Both machines have right side mounted CVTs with high intakes. The key difference in the CVT intake and exhaust is that the KingQuad CVT exhaust comes out above the rear storage area behind the taillight. Some folks claim that this will allow water or mud into the CVT if you take the KingQuad in extremely deep water, but that hasn't been much of a concern in our experience. It's hard to capture on camera, but Suzuki shaped the CVT intake and exhaust as high as possible with bends that decrease the likelihood of taking anything in, as long as you don't submerge the machine. The CVT intake and exhaust is in the same location on the Grizzly. They're just under the hood, below the handlebars, which is as high as they can be in the bodywork. Engine intakes are located high on both machines. The Grizzly's is a little easier to access without removing any plastics, but the KingQuad seems better protected from the elements at the highest point in the bodywork. The air filter seal on the Grizzly is a common complaint among Grizzly owners, with dirt potentially allowed in the intake without modification. We haven't heard that complaint from KingQuad owners. Controls are similar on both machines with independent brake levers and similar four-wheel drive systems. The gauge cluster is larger on the Grizzly, making it a little easier to read, and the selection buttons for scrolling through information are bigger and easier to use. Speaking of information, the Grizzly offers a little more with a voltage reader and temperature gauge that the KingQuad doesn't have. The Grizzly also comes pre-wired for Yamaha's Adventure Pro GPS system, which offers GPS functionality and advanced vehicle data as an aftermarket upgrade. That's not a feature we plan on taking advantage of, but it's not available on the KingQuad.
Another little difference, we got a hydraulic rear brake system versus a cable.
Both shift levers for the CVTs are located on the driver's left. The key difference is that the Grizzly has a park gear where the KingQuad does not, and the Grizzly appears to offer more protection to the shift lever mechanism, where the Suzuki seems a little more vulnerable to mud and debris clogging the shifter. And that's a complaint that we have heard from Suzuki owners. Parking gear on the Grizzly. Low, high, neutral, and reverse on the KingQuad. So this is your parking brake. Go ahead and engage. With a lever, snaps the rear brake into place. Arguably better for transporting the machine with that parking brake because the clutch isn't going to take any rolling force when you're on a trailer. But it is more convenient to have the parking gear in the transmission on the Grizzly. We didn't think it was possible for a shift lever on the transmission to feel better than the Grizzly until we got the KingQuad. Both machines shift easily, but the KingQuad's is smoother and lighter. It's hands down the smoothest shifting ATV on the market. We'll look into the transmission further in the performance test. The KingQuad comes with removable rack protectors, which can help with securing some cargo depending on the load. Rack capacity is 66 pounds front and 132 pounds rear. The Grizzly 700's rack capacity is higher at 110 pounds front and 198 pounds rear. However, both machines claim an identical towing capacity of 1,322 pounds, and both machines have a 2-inch hitch receiver. Storage capacity is technically similar, with nearly identical water-resistant front storage compartments on the right side of both machines. The Grizzly also has a convenient front storage compartment below the dash that comes in super handy, while the KingQuad has a little more storage at the rear by mounting an extra 4-liter storage compartment next to the existing 4-liter storage compartment. The rear cargo compartment on the Grizzly isn't sealed very well, and it looks like it'll let in water and debris if you like to romp through the deep stuff. We don't really like the storage on the KingQuad. The compartments are smaller than we expected, and none of them are as convenient or as large as the Grizzly's front storage compartment below the dash. They all seal well though, contributing again to better fit and finish on the KingQuad, but with 110 pounds more cargo capacity and more usable storage, this is an easy win for the Grizzly. Both machines have handlebar mounted headlight pods, which is great for illuminating the direction of travel. Both headlight pods are halogen lights, but the Grizzly benefits from LED headlights and taillights, while the KingQuad only features LEDs in the taillight. We think both manufacturers should upgrade to LED lights all the way around. Ground clearance is higher on the Grizzly, primarily due to tire selection. The XTR and SE models claim 11.8 inches, and the base model with 26-inch tires is 11.3 inches. The front A-arms also have some arch, which increases the width of the ground clearance. The KingQuad with 25-inch tires sits at 10.2 inches of slightly narrower ground clearance. Speaking of A-arms, both machines come with factory A-arm guards, but the Grizzly's covers more of the A-arms front and rear, and it wraps all the way underneath to offer a little more protection than the KingQuad's. But A-arm guards don't come standard on all ATVs. Suspension travel is a little different, with the Grizzly taking the edge with 7.6 inches of front travel and 9.1 inches rear. The KingQuad sports 6.7 inches of front travel and 7.7 inches rear. We'll pay attention to that difference in the performance test to see how it translates into rider experience. With the Grizzly XTR, you're getting a factory-installed worn winch, 14-inch aluminum wheels, and 27-inch Maxxis tires in a square setup with a total price of $12,399 for 2023. The SE model drops the winch but keeps the Maxxis tires for $11,999, and the base model EPS Grizzly, which still has aluminum wheels, is $11,399. The KingQuad SE Plus comes in at $11,249 for 2023. Greater value can certainly be found with the EPS version at $10,649 or a non-EPS version at $9,599. To sum up our walk-around comparison, the Grizzly has arguably better aesthetics, increased cargo capacity, more suspension travel, better ground clearance, and more premium features available from the factory. But the KingQuad has better fit and finish, arguably better ergonomics, a smoother shifting CVT, and offers better value in their lineup selection. But now it's time for the performance test. We bought these machines specifically to do this comparison, but in order to avoid owner or familiarization bias, we spent equal time on both machines through their life this far. When looking at owner reviews, it's important to remember that familiarization with a machine typically builds preference and bias towards the feel and ergonomics over time. Weight, feel, and balance is very similar on both machines. These machines feel very similar in size, seat height is very close at just over 36 inches, but you feel like you're sitting down in the Grizzly a little more with the softer seat and slightly taller handlebars. The KingQuad is lighter than the XTR Grizzly by around 60 pounds due to the tires and winch, but the base model Grizzly is about 20 pounds lighter than the KingQuad. The KingQuad is longer by about 3 inches, but that only translates to an inch more in wheelbase, and the Grizzly is slightly wider in any trim. As far as ride experience goes, it's hard to feel any discernible difference in the dimensions. Okay guys, we're out here doing the performance test, and we gotta be honest with you. We've ridden these, what do we do, about 100 miles the other day?
Yeah.
And the tires, the Maxxis Zillas, were just too much of a performance difference to be able to do the entire test on. So went ahead and put some 25 inchers which are identical in size to the ones that are on the Suzuki, and they're just cheap. They're Tusk Terraforms.
Tusk Terraforms and some ITP Steely wheels.
Yeah, just so we could, you know, get a better idea of the neck and neck performance with similarly spec tires. What do you think?
I'll tell you right now, Tusk, Kinder Bear Claws, Zillas. Tusk right now, just this little zipping, on point, love them. They may stay on there forever.
Turning sharper, more acceleration.
Yep.
Like, tires matter on a big single when you have less power than a twin, and it's just easier to turn a little bit smaller tires.
And as sloppy it is out here today, they are hooking up great and turning when you want them to, no push.
Yeah, so big performance difference. We're just not huge fans of the Zillas. We're not mud guys. So on quads like this, a smaller tire just gives you back some of that performance, and it sucks to go ahead and buy an XTR and want to swap out the tires. And those are the right tires for some folks. That square setup was a smart move by Yamaha, but like we said in the actual test video, we just wish there was a different option on the SE, or maybe multiple different base models that had a better tire than the bias ply that comes on the EPS, but not quite so mud oriented as the Zillas. That would be a big step forward for Yamaha.
And the Zilla's actually done all right on the trails, but we got into some rocky ledge situations where you had to crawl and you could feel every slip of the lug.
In general, trail riding, the Zillas are fine. We're not saying they're bad. It's just when you try to ride a little bit more spirited, you're getting more front end push, and they are just not letting you get the most out of the performance of the Grizzly. That's just the way we see it.
Another reason why I was wanting to try something smaller, coming to find out we had somebody contact a Yamaha rep, and Yamaha got back. The clutching on the base model, SE and XTR, is 100% the same.
Both machines' power delivery is incredibly smooth off CVT engagement. The first thing you'll notice is a little more pep and punch from the Suzuki in the bottom end. Suzuki's single-cylinder engine is the bigger of the two at 722 cc's versus the 686 in the Yamaha. Combine that with the lighter tires, and you can certainly feel the power advantage in the KingQuad. The KingQuad's power advantage is most notable off the bottom end, but it's still present in the mid-range, making it a little easier to pop up the front end on the trail.
It's got a small burp, like at first throttle on low end.
Yeah, definitely.
As soon as you get past that burp,
it wakes right up.
It's a dramatic difference between the Grizzly and this thing. She goes. We didn't bother doing drag races, even though they were requested, because we don't really have a good area to do so, but we didn't get these machines to drag race either. A couple things are immediately clear regardless though. First, the KingQuad feels a little quicker, but it's not going to matter much once you're rolling. And second, it's clear that neither machine would compete in power with 850cc class machines. But if winning drag races is your goal on an ATV, just know your big twin is still going to get smoked by a Banshee. Big twins have become more popular over the last decade. The power can certainly be an advantage if you want to move bigger tires or ride at highway speed, but we've come to appreciate the balance of weight, agility, and power for trail riding. Both machines have excellent mid-range power, and that's why we like big singles. They feel lighter and more nimble than the larger displacement options, and usable trail riding power is perfect between 15 and 45 miles an hour, which is where we expect these machines to spend most of their rolling existence. The power is more than adequate for tackling steep hills or moderate mud. We wouldn't recommend one of these machines for XC racing, where top end power will fall flat on the fastest sections of the track, but for trail riders, they provide plenty of power to have some fun and get as aggressive as is safely possible on public trails. Engine braking feels similar on both the machines, but the KingQuad comes in a little stronger at slower speed. We wouldn't call that good or bad, but it's the only thing that stood out as a difference. Throttle response and throttle feel is great on both. Both CVT-style transmissions operate smoothly with little noticeable differences. These feel like two of the best CVTs on the market, and we have nothing but praise for either of them. But it is noteworthy that Yamaha offers a 10-year belt warranty. However, equally noteworthy is that Suzuki's overall warranty is longer at 12 months instead of the 6-month warranty on the Grizzly. Handling is hands down better on the Grizzly, especially at slower speed. Even with the heavier tires, EPS on the Grizzly is clearly better, making tighter trails feel more effortless. Tighter trails are really a breeze for either of the machines though, with the narrow midsections and relatively lighter weight contributing to the agility and rider confidence on both. The Grizzly has a slightly tighter turning radius, probably due to the shorter length and wheelbase, but rider fatigue shouldn't be an issue on either of these machines due to the steering after a long day in the saddle.
I feel like I can go a little bit more aggressive into the turns with the Grizzly. I don't know if it's the 2 inches that it's wider, but I feel like I'm three-wheeling a little bit easier on the KingQuad than what I do.
That's fair. Probably the wheelbase is longer. This is a longer machine. Just laws of physics, when the machine is longer and more narrow, it's not going to be as stable. It's not a huge significant difference. No. It's not like anything where you're like, oh my god, I can't ride this, it's so unstable. They really feel very, very similar when you're kind of bouncing around through narrow trails, but I could definitely see you lowered that by 2 inches.
Yep.
You know, you lost the ground clearance, so now ground clearance is easy on these two, but you weren't mentioning that when the Grizzly was taller.
That is true. And two, this thing, when you might be going into a corner a whole lot hot and heavier with this thing too, but when you come out, the Grizzly, it takes her a little while for it to spool up and get the power going. This thing, if you're already kind of halfway into the low range and you come out and gun it, she goes. I mean, it's a fun machine.
Trail chop is absorbed better by the suspension travel on the Grizzly. Rougher sections of the trail definitely have the KingQuad bouncing around more, and you can feel more of that feedback through the bars on the KingQuad. The KingQuad doesn't bottom out any easier though, so that shouldn't be a concern. The rougher the trail gets, the more you notice the suspension difference, with the Grizzly handling the tougher stuff more compliantly, but neither machine struggling. You can find the limits of the suspension on either machine off moderate trail jumps, but the difference isn't really discernible. The Grizzly suspension is softer, so it moves through its available travel more easily. The KingQuad's is stiffer but shorter, so finding the suspension limits on jump landings is very close. When you don't hit the limits on the machines, both land smoothly and hold their lines well when returning to ground. Suspension really accounts for the most significant difference between the ride feel and quality. At the softest settings, the Grizzly ride is by far more plush and comfortable, but that gap certainly narrows as you stiffen the suspension up. Having independent brake levers on both machines is awesome, and the rear foot brakes on both machines are easier to use than a lot of the competition that has you lifting up your entire foot to hit the brake. The key difference in the brakes is that the rear brakes on the KingQuad are a sealed multi-disc system that Suzuki claims is lower maintenance. They both feel equally effective, and we know from past experience that you'll have to change rear brake pads fairly often on the Grizzly if you ride it hard. We'd simply need more time to provide that type of feedback on the KingQuad's brakes, so we'll leave this one up to you. Exhaust notes of both machines is fairly similar. We like the stainless steel exhaust pipe on the KingQuad versus the painted pipe on the Grizzly, but there seems to be more aftermarket options for the Grizzly if that's a factor for you. As you ride, you'll occasionally notice a slight popping sound on deceleration on the Grizzly, and occasionally a slight gurgling sound from the KingQuad. We'd guess that both of the unusual noises are related to emission modifications, and neither one indicate a performance or engine operation issue. Overall, the ride experience is more similar on these machines than it is different. Similar true four-wheel drive systems are nearly identical, and they are our favorite four-wheel drive systems on ATVs. Ergonomics have notable differences, but they largely come down to personal preference. Power steering, low speed handling, and suspension is better on the Grizzly, but power, fit and finish, and value is better on the KingQuad. Both machines are time tested and have outstanding reputations for reliability. We've found more customer complaints about the Grizzly, namely the air intake and some occasions of fuel pump failure, but there's simply a bigger pool of Grizzlies out there, so it's easier to find potential complaints. Both machines are a blast on the trail, and either machine will fit the needs of most riders. So which one is better?
Yeah, very, very, very subtle differences in like fit and feel, but you definitely wider wheelbase, shorter width. You're gonna notice that a little bit. These are much more comparable machines with the same size tires on them.
I mean, I told you from the get-go, if I would have rode this one first before the Grizzly, I'd have bought a KingQuad.
And that's not to say that the Grizzly is bad. We're just, when we say that, we're keeping in mind that we spent $2,000 less on the KingQuad.
Yeah.
So the cost factor has to play there. And when you're talking about cost factor versus fun factor, the fun factor is much a closer gap than the cost factor, which makes the KingQuad, you know, for some folks, it's just going to be a better buy. Grizzly's the better machine. We have stated that over and over again to each other. The Grizzly's more well-rounded, it rides better, power steering is better. There's a lot of things about the Grizzly that make it a better machine. But it's okay to admit that one machine is better than the other and still have fun on the machine that you don't think is quite as well-rounded.
Is it $2,000 better and then have to turn around and spend another Black Friday $500 for something else? Is it that big of a difference? No way in the world.
Yeah. We have put some parts onto both of these machines. I think I mentioned it in the narrative, but added the front bumper because there is no protection on the KingQuad of those front plastics. Suzuki's OEM Suzuki's OEM front bumper is the one I went with because Suzuki's fit and finish is so good, and that translated into their OEM parts. That was the easiest install ever.
It took us less than 45 minutes to install it, and that was us talking for 44 minutes.
Yes, that's exactly right. That's exactly right. And we mentioned we did add the foot pegs because we don't like the way the footwells feel on the Grizzly, but you also bought another ad that I've talked about in the narrative, which is the airbox mod. We haven't put that on yet, but that's our next project.
I've actually got the, and this is just necessary items, the airbox mod, and then I've even got the ricochet floorboard protectors coming, because you get out here and some of this stuff and you're constantly feeling rocks and tree roots hitting the bottom
and
of
tree
the
limbs,
floorboard.
especially.
Tree limbs, yeah.
So just a little bit, and you only got it for the footwells, not the whole underbelly.
Footwells, yeah. Going from a sport quad and then having this much ground clearance, hey, I'm not worried about the bottom of it right now.
Yep.
But if you want the factory add-ons of the XTR Grizzly, there's clearly only one choice. But the KingQuad will leave room in your budget for making more personal selections. We'd recommend including availability and quality of the dealer into that choice. But we can tell you that if you've narrowed your choice down to these machines, you're definitely on the right track, and you're not going to be disappointed either way. We hope you enjoyed this comparison of two of the best ATVs on the market as much as we enjoyed making it for you. Hit us up in the comments if you have any questions about these machines, and we'll see you next time right here on Dirt Obsession.